while Zach LaVine is in the midst of a 5-straight-game, 30-point streak. A lot of the questions now around the Chicago Bulls with, is Zach LaVine's trade value rising, or should the Chicago Bulls look to keep Zach LaVine? On today's episode, I'm going to talk about what I actually talked about with Lonzo Ball not too long ago. Is it time to start getting ready for Zach LaVine to be with the Chicago Bulls for the long run? But the more important question, is the front office going to be able to put a team around Zach LaVine that can truly be competitive in the time that they have? We're going to talk a little bit about that, plus dive into the mailbag, all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go to get into this content for today, y'all. I want to talk about Zach LaVine. Zachary LaVine. Zach is having a great season, and I think that more and more people are starting to come to the realization of just how good Zach LaVine's season has been. And this should be no surprise to people, right? Is that so many people, so many outlets in the media spent so much time over the last year completely killing Zach LaVine for the player that he is, right? Completely killing him for it. And then when you look at Zach LaVine and who he's been over his career, as I said before, from 2019 until he went down with his injury last season, there are only 9 players in the league that scored more points than Zach LaVine. That's not to say that Zach LaVine has not been a flawed player over the course of his career, that he's not made some mistakes with ball handling and turnovers and things in crunch time. All that has been there and evident. But it's clear, one thing is clear, is that the market tried to undervalue Zach LaVine and try to maximize his flaws. And I do think some of that is due to the contract that he has at over $40 million. And the question is that at this point, like with where the league is going, and the CBA, is that teams are going to naturally look at contracts as large as Zach LaVine's, especially if they're adding him already to a core that's been developed. And they're going to have some questions on what does that look like, right? How does that put us, where does that put us financially? And that's just the modern era, right? That's where we're starting to see it go. Like we've seen these contracts rise exponentially. When you look at how contracts have risen over the last 10 years to where they are now, right? And if it would have stayed in the same CBA that we had to where teams just were willing to take on contracts to spend that luxury tax money, that's different, right? But now with the second tax apron and teams really seeing how restrictive that is, teams are going to be a little bit more protective over that, right? And so now that leads the Bulls into this place where you have this player in Zach LaVine who is playing amazingly well. You know what's so crazy about the way that Zach LaVine's playing, right? It's the fact that how he's doing it. When you look at Zach LaVine last year, and I don't want to turn this. I know we're facing DeMar DeRozan tomorrow, and I don't want to turn this into a DeMar versus anything else. Like that's really, truly not what I'm trying to make this be, right? But when you look at the way that Zach LaVine is scoring over this 5-game stretch, and really over the season, it's not like he's shooting a bunch of threes. Actually, only 26% of Zach LaVine's offense comes from three-point shooting because he's an efficient three-point shooter, meaning he doesn't have to take a lot to do damage from the three-point line. But a lot of where Zach LaVine is doing damage at is coming in the mid-range. It's coming in the paint, right? That and in the restricted area. Like that's where Zach LaVine's shots are mainly coming from. He has such a nice distribution of where 36% of his shots are coming in the restricted area. 36% of his shots are coming in the restricted area. Almost 20% of his shots are coming from the mid-range. That's over half his offense right there. Another 14% coming from in the paint. Zach LaVine is not doing this thing where he's just spamming threes. He's being a very, very intentional 3-level scorer. And that's what makes Zach LaVine. 3-level scorers like Zach LaVine do not come around very often. And that leads us to the next part of the conversation, right? And this has always been the biggest question here. What do the Bulls do with Zach LaVine, right? And then what is the intent behind what they do with Zach LaVine? I think that is the most important thing that a lot of people aren't looking at. It's not just about what the Bulls do and what they can get back for Zach LaVine. It's not just about that. Zach LaVine right now is the hottest player in the NBA, right? But it's also about what direction are you going and if you decide to move Zach LaVine. And that's the question that I think not enough people are talking about and asking in regards to this. I see so many Bulls fans when they talk about Vooch getting moved, or they talk about Zach being moved, they say, well, the Bulls need to get this if they're trying to win. Well, what if that's not what they're trying to do with that move? They're actually trying to maximize their chances to keep the pick. But here's the thing. Pick aside, right? And this is one of the toughest questions that front offices have to ask themselves. If you move off of Zach LaVine, right, what are the chances that you get somebody as good or better than Zach LaVine? That's the risk that you have to ask yourself, right? And that is the place for my tanking Bulls fans to like, we got to keep the pick. We got to keep the pick. Trade everybody. Keep the pick. It comes down to that because, like I said before, we have this thing that we're looking at it now. If it's either keep Zach and Vooch or keep the pick, where both are possible. Right now, as the Bulls keep winning more, that becomes less and less of a possibility. But what you are not in a place, in my opinion, where you can undervalue Zach LaVine. You just can't. You can't undervaluing Zach LaVine would be foolish. If you're going to move him, you need to get value back. It just is what it is, right? And to highlight what I'm talking about in regards to the way that Zach LaVine is scoring, just you guys know I like my numbers. Zach LaVine is actually in as far as starters, right? 61st in the NBA as far as three-point frequency. 61st. Just think about that. Think about how many games we've seen Zach LaVine absolutely kill from three-point line. And he's towards the bottom as far as starters in the NBA, as far as frequency from the three-point. Zach LaVine is truly a three-level scorer. And those are rare, right? And so the question now in this is how does the future look if the Bulls were to keep Zach LaVine? And that's something that we don't know, right? I can say, albeit how much the Bulls have not been free agent destinations over the course of their career. Hell, we had an MVP, Derrick Rose, and found it hard to attract free agents. Now, there was an injury over that as well, but, that's the thing. We found it hard to attract free agents. We built tough playoff teams that we just needed a star to come. Even before we got Derrick Rose, you look at how often that team made the playoffs and how much fits they gave other teams in the Eastern Conference. And we still couldn't attract free agents then. So this thing that we're looking at with the Bulls better damn well hope that some of these young players start developing. And that's where some of the stuff gets into, right? And I think that the front office and their, reluctance to move on from some of these players comes down to the fact that they have not drafted well. It's not like you have a front office that can trust its ability to draft and develop players. Now, they better hope that Matas Buzelis can be that. They better hope that Kobe White has another gear that he can go to, or Io comes back. He continues to show that he has another gear to go to. And that's another place that this team is in because we have to look at it in this manner, right? The Bulls could be right back where they were in the DeMar DeRozan era very soon, right? Yes, they have $56 million below the first tax apron that they have at their disposal next year. But then let's look at this. They have Josh Giddey up for a contract extension. Take that for what you will, right? And then after the Josh Giddey contract extension, the year after that, you got Kobe White and Io coming up for an extension. If those guys continue, especially Io, he's going to get a huge raise. Now, Kobe kind of being an inconsistent player, I can see him going from the around $12 million he's at now to maybe around 20, right? Now, Vooch's contract comes off at that around that time. Lonzo's contract comes off between now and then. But you could see a world in which the Chicago Bulls salary cap looks like a $40 million Zach LaVine, a $18 million Patrick Williams, a $20 million Kobe White, Io's making $7 million now. So let's say Io gets to where Kobe is now, between 12 and 15 million, a 12 to 15 million Io DeSumo, right? A 25 plus million. I didn't even think about Josh Giddey getting his contract coming up soon. And you have to ask yourself, what is then the ceiling of that team? And that's the question that the Bulls are trying to find the answer to, or find the semblance of the answer to, while this team is building, right? And so a casualty of that could be a Vooch, could be a Zach, it could be whatever. And that's what this team has to ask itself, is that where are they going to go? But I tell you what, Zach LaVine has a future here in Chicago. That doesn't mean that it'll necessarily happen, but he does have a future here in Chicago. Now, will Zach LaVine stay? Will the Bulls be able to be successful over that? How successful will they be able to be? that's a chance. But I think we need to start coming to the realization that Zach LaVine could end up staying in Chicago for the long haul, meaning to the end of this contract. And we'll see where the Bulls can get to at that time. They're right now on a 36, 37 win pace. That's getting close to what they were last season, which is cool, right? But you got to go further than that. And I think that's the thing that we've seen with this team is that taking that next step has been very difficult for this team. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Let's go ahead and get into the mailbag. This one's from Michael Korn.
Hey, Haize, Mike Korn here. Hope your new year is starting out happy, healthy, and prosperous. Maybe I'm still stoked from the Bulls' last 2 wins, Knicks and Spurs, against them. But I really think realistically that their goal should be to finish the season 5 games above 500. I think they can beat any team in the East in the series. Not because that they're so good. I think it's they have potential, and we've seen it. Hang on a second, it's got talked over at work. But anyway, it's not so much the Bulls and their talent, it's that the rest of the teams in the East are just not that formidable. Yeah, there's some good teams, but we play up to them. So that with the idea that in the Bulls searching for an identity, I hope it's at this point underdog that's got dog. Anyway, thanks for a great show as always.
All right, Michael Korn. So of 5 games above 500, that'll put the Bulls at a 46 win pace. They're currently in the East. The only teams that are on pace to finish at 46 wins or better are Cleveland, Boston, New York, Milwaukee, and Orlando's hovering around that. I do think now with Paolo's return, they're going to get right back onto that pace. That's difficult, right? For the Bulls to finish 5 games above 500, Mike, that means that they would have to play with an almost 62% win percentage for the remainder of the season. That's difficult, right? And the Bulls are still a wildly inconsistent team. We're still bad defensively more times than not. Right now, we haven't been healthy, and we've been winning games. We've won a lot of games. We're playing with an above 500 record here recently, but it's just difficult to predict the Bulls to finish with that type of pace. It's just really tough. And keep in mind, teams in the Eastern Conference are also why, I know that the common thing is that the East is weak, but these teams in the East are getting better. The Pacers are on a 5-game winning streak. They've only lost 3 games in the last 30 days, right? You got the Orlando Magic that's getting Paolo back. They went 19-15 without Paolo and stayed towards the top 4 of the Eastern Conference. So getting to a 46-win pace is going to present itself to be very difficult for the Chicago Bulls. The Detroit Pistons playing 8-2 in their last 10. They're playing better, right? The Miami Heat have won 2 in a row. They're 6-4 in their last 10, right? And then the Philadelphia 76ers are still this potential good team, right, that just has not been able to win basketball games yet and find their rhythm that, depending on how much they wake up in the second half of the season, could really disturb some things as well. So here's the thing, the Bulls, could it happen? I mean, stranger things have happened. I just think that it's going to be very difficult for the Bulls to finish 5 games above 500 with the pace that they'd have to play in, with the East getting better, right, with the Bulls having a tough West Coast trip coming in that as well, which I think is going to tell a lot for the Bulls. But I will say this they have 4 games remaining in this home stretch. How they perform in that and if they can win the majority of these games could set them off on a really nice platform. But that 5 games above 500 is really tough. That's really, really tough to do with everything that's going on. But we'll see. If they can do it, great, right? I don't think anybody's going to crap on it if they do it well, except the tankers, right? But, we'll see what happens. It's going to be really difficult to do, but we'll see, Mike. We'll see. All right, let's get into this next voicemail, man. This one's from Isaiah.
Hey, Haize, this is Isaiah. It's the first-time caller, man. Been watching since last season. And just really gravitate towards it just because I appreciate your mindset, just being real for the fan base and the players. And tonight, I was watching the Pacers game, man, and you know, that's just the best way I can put it. But just watching, man, just seeing, to me, it's such an inconsistent team. And we know this. I've been watching since 2011, pretty much with D-Rose. That's pretty much what got me into the Bulls, man. And pretty much the way I see it now, man, is that we have a lot of talent, but like you always say, there's no direction. And I guess where my irritation comes in, like tonight, with a night like tonight, we're down by 20 pretty much majority of the game. Lack of effort, lack of efficiency, lack of execution. To me, lack of coaching, and things that we already see and things that you always speak about. I just like, why is Chris Duarte in the game, bro, but not Matas? I'm not saying position-wise, like, they are an exact swap, but, like, why is he in the game, bro? You know, it's like, why did he play, like, 6 minutes until the pretty much really, really garbage time towards the end of the game? And I get it. It's like, we want to win, but at the same time, it's like, bro, the starters had us in that hole in the first place, you know, and it's like, I'm not saying anything's going to be perfect, bro. Matas is going to come out single-handedly turn the tide, man, but like, give the fans what they want to see, but also let him develop and not just stand in the corner with his elbows tucked waiting to shoot three ball. You know, it's like he can do more than just stand there. And I feel the same way about Dalen, same way about Julian, and that's kind of why I get upset. I mean, even seeing Adama, like, we struggle some nights. I'm not saying Adama's perfect, but even you said it. Like, Billy Donovan said, oh, well, we want to see how he looks against, like, bigger NBA talent. It's like, well, you don't play him. You know, it's like, I think the last person that should be playing is Chris Duarte. You know, like, Adama to me should have been up through from the G League last season, you know, so I kind of just got upset, bro, had to turn the game off. Not to be like, I already knew we got 2 good wins. I was like, man, 3 good things can't happen in a row. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't know, man, pretty much just, ultimately, the Bulls team, like you said, we needed direction. And to me, the energy guys, Dalen Terry, to me, gives his effort every night. Yeah, he makes mistakes, you know, but like, so do the starters, you know, and it's like Billy Donovan was like, well, I'm not going to, you know, sacrifice the win, but it's like, bro, we're losing, so put them in. You know, there's no reason why him, Jalen Smith, you know, all the guys played like 6 minutes, bro, until absolute garbage time. So, yeah, that's all I got, man. Just wanted to rant, but I appreciate you, Haize, always, man, and have a blessed day. Appreciate you, brother.
First of all, thank you for calling in, Isaiah. We always welcome first-time callers here. We appreciate you. As far as your question here, right, I think winning and developing while winning is always a very hard thing to do for some places, depending on what your level of winning is, right? And the Bulls are this team that's trying to fight and compete for wins, but they're a middle-of-the-pack team, meaning they have to put up a lot of effort to win those games, meaning that a coach like Billy Donovan is going to go towards the veterans a little bit more. Now, I do think that Matas should be getting more time and opportunity. I said it on last night's live stream. Matas Buzelis is a guy to me, he's shown when he is trusted, when he does get more minutes, when he is playing consistently, that learning curve, it takes a really good direction for him. Now, he's still a rookie that's going to make some mistakes. He's going to be bad defensively some nights. There's going to be some nights where his shot is not falling at all. And the question is that how much can the Bulls really palate to be okay with that while they're trying to win basketball games? And that's the difficult tightrope to walk, right? And I think overall, like, the thing that's been placed upon this team is that we're a team that's always trying to compete. We've not been a team that's necessarily tried to bottom out or anything like that. And because of that, they put you in a really weird place, right? So I think overall, I agree that, you know, we want to see more from these young guys because they've shown some flashes, but at the same time, they're going to have to make the most of their opportunity. That's just what we're seeing. They're going to have to make the most out of their opportunity under this coach, under this regime, where we currently are right now, to be able to get those minutes, to get that XP, to develop and grow as young players. And that's just, I mean, we could talk all day about should it be that way or do we want it to be that way, but that's the way that it is. That's the way that this team is structured right now. And yeah, sometimes it's frustrating to see guys like Matas Buzelis on the back end of the bench in games where it's like, hey, Matas' shot blocking could have helped a little bit, but the rookie isn't bringing it. I think, you know, Billy Donovan, I'm not a Billy Donovan guy. You know, the Bulls can fire Billy Donovan tomorrow, right? But in yesterday's daily episode, I did talk a little bit about that. Like, the position that he's been put in has in part been because of the front office's desire to still compete and some of the bad decisions that they've also made in the draft and with personnel. So I think that plays a part into it. But all right, y'all, let's get into the next voicemail, man. This one is from 8 Lives.
Man, what's going on, Harry? It's your boy 8 Lives. I had to come speak on this one about why Zach being snubbed. And I gotta say, this is what I've been talking about. From the beginning, I was like, man, when Zach came in and said, like, man, most of that shit them people was saying was a lie, and just judge me off on what I said in my mouth and how I carried myself on the court and giving 100% to the Bulls. Once he said that, I'm like, okay, Zach, all in. This is all I was waiting on because, remember, in my opinion, I always felt like AK just wanted to really get rid of DeMar. He never really wanted to get rid of Zach. So that's why I don't understand why people kept saying, oh, we're going to trade Zach. Oh, he's good enough, his trade value. Like, no, AK wanted to keep Zach. He got love for Zach. He would have traded him in the offseason for pennies if he would wait till he got to the season now and trade him for pennies, especially when Zach been balling. But I think, like, all around the media world, especially on YouTube, everybody know that you are number one content creator. So when people come and look, because I'll be going on other people, the Philadelphia 76ers, a lot of other teams, I go look at some of their top content creators in my list. When people come and they look at your show, all they see is the fans bashing and trying to trade our players off Zach and Booch. And you the number one content creator. So this is like most of the fans is on your show. So when they look at the comments and they seeing what's going on, we've been bashing that. So why would they all of a sudden want him to be an all-star? So I really put that on us. Man, this season when it started, I already kind of knew that we weren't going to have no star like we had last year, because last year it did feel like Zach was on some BS. But once he came back and said he wasn't, and I felt like DeMar was gone, I always felt, you know what I'm saying, that was just like I was going to judge him on how he carried himself this year. And man, that Mar passed the test, man. That Mar been going crazy, bro. And now it's kind of too late. That's why I always say I kind of hate this part of the season, because everybody be trying to find every reason to break the team up, and it just looks like that ain't what AK was on. If you watch all his moves, it didn't look like he was gonna come in and, you know, I can't say it was gonna happen on the trade deadline, but for the most part, I don't think he traded none of the every core. I've been saying that from the beginning. It just didn't seem like it, but we just gotta I don't know, man. I just feel like I feel like this on our own fans. Now, we've been supporting these guys from the beginning and act like we was riding with them, and they'll probably take more look into Zach and them. But the way we've been bashing them, hell no, they're not going to go to no All-Star game. But hopefully they just keep balling just for the entertainment part and just for the love for the fans, man. Because Kobe, my boy, been stepping up and going crazy too, man. And I can't say nothing else but see where we got to take responsibility for that. It's on us, bro. Because we ain't been doing nothing but trading Zach the whole goddamn season.
Listen, it's always good to hear 8 Lives when he doesn't have to whisper and hide. You know, I'm just playing. All jokes to my brother 8 Lives. But here's the thing. I think that you're confusing not wanting to trade Zach with not wanting to just get rid of Zach. Those are two very different things. I do think that this front office would trade Zach LaVine if they got a deal that they felt is actually what they need. I don't think that they look at Zach LaVine as this player that's like, oh, well, we rather move DeMar than Zach. No, I think they probably would have moved off of both of them last year, right? Now, I think that that the Bulls, if they got offered a trade package that they felt was everything that they valued in it, then yeah. The difference is that they don't want to get rid of Zach. They still have value for Zach, and thus they want to see that value met with what they feel is a fair value trade. But I don't think that this front office is yet to show that they have this ultimate huge investment in Zach other than giving him that contract. And I think that's what this overall is. I think that this front office looks at Zach LaVine's contract as maybe limiting them with when you're paired with a Reinsdorf front ownership that doesn't want to pay the luxury tax. And I think that AK didn't necessarily really grasp just how restrictive not going into the luxury tax at all was going to be. I also think that when he gave Zach LaVine that contract, he really did feel that they had this base that was going to be winning and competing in these things. So I think all those things go into, but they're not going to sell Zach LaVine for pennies on the dollars, and they're right not to sell off Zach LaVine or any of these players for pennies on the dollar. You want value back if you're going to move off. And as I said in the opening segment today, I think that Zach LaVine is going to be around for a while. All right, let's get into this next voicemail, man. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Haize? This is Shay. You know, I asked you a question about who we're being led by and or who this team really is. I'm going to ask you another question. Do you believe that AK has put this team in a bad spot due to who he's drafted over the years since he's been here with the Chicago Bulls? And the reason why I ask that is because when you look at who he's drafted, you know, besides maybe Ayo DeSumo, a lot of these guys aren't really panning out. You know what I'm saying? Patrick Williams has shown us signs here or there. Julian Phillips has shown us a little tad bit of development. I mean, he's still in second year. Dalen Terry, you know, his minutes have been inconsistent. Matas Buzelis, the jury is kind of still out on him. But have you ever maybe thought that due to him not drafting due to him drafting projected athletic players instead of just actual talent that actually know that they have a skill set when coming into the league has hurt this team and hurt like their development system of young guys more than just who we've signed or how he's constructed a roster together or who he's had as a coach? Because the way I see it, with these draft picks that he's been drafted, it's been a consistent thing. You know what I'm saying? Some real good athletes, but not really super like players that have a true skill set. I mean, has some flashes defensively as Patrick Williams, and Terry Julian Phillips, and Matas Buzelis has. But do you think that AK going forward should look to draft maybe more of skilled players, maybe like more of a score, maybe more actual scores instead of these just projected players that we have to develop and, develop their jump shots a lot more? Because the way I see it, the only guy that's performing well who's young in our system is Kobe White, and AK did not even draft him. And when you look at AK, who he's drafted, they've just been project type players. That's my question. Tell me what you think. Should he draft more of a talent base when it comes to players, or more project players that he's been drafting throughout the years? Tell me what you think. Peace.
Has AK put us in a bad spot with who he's drafted? And my initial answer to that is yes. You look at not getting Walker Kessler when you needed him instead of drafting Dalen Terry. Like that draft pick alone, getting the rim protection, some extra rebounding, some big man depth for Vooch, that would have helped the Bulls so much in what they have gone through over the last few years, right? You look, of course, I know people go to the Tyrese Halliburton over Patrick Williams, and that's a fair one as well. That puts your team in a different place. But then you had just drafted Kobe White, so I don't think they ever really were going to go point guard there. But again, I could be wrong on that. But I think the overarching in reality, right? And that's the alternative reality version of if the Bulls would have made those moves, where would we be now? But I think right now, because those moves have been made, you can't undo them. I think the big part of all this is, does Matas Buzelis end up being worth it? And by that, I mean this. If the Bulls do draft Walker Kessler, we're probably not bad enough to where we get Matas Buzelis. If the Bulls did draft Walker Kessler instead of Dalen Terry, I think that money that we spent on like Andre Drummond could have maybe went to some more shooting. And then at that point, what does your team look like, right? I even think that if you do draft Walker Kessler, maybe you don't re-sign Nikola Vucevic, and maybe the Bulls do look to move him when he was expiring a couple of years ago. Maybe they do that because they look at Walker Kessler as being a serviceable starting center, right? But because of all of that, if those moves do happen and the Bulls are better over that stretch, we don't get Matas Buzelis. It's much like when people say things, and it's much different levels, right? When people say, well, we should have drafted LaMarcus Aldridge over Tyrese Thomas. Yeah, we should have. But if we did, probably would have never gotten Derrick Rose. And that's just the reality of it. And so if Matas Buzelis, and I know fans are never going to have this level of objective view to ever really look at it this way, but if Matas Buzelis ends up turning out to be a stud, then I say this: not getting Walker Kessler, not drafting Tyrese Halliburton would all be worth it to me. If he ends up turning into a stud, it's all worth it. Now, people are still going to go back on it and say, oh, we should have did this, we should have did that, that's just the nature of fandom. But I think that's the end. Where we are right now, the fact that we can't unwrite history, is that if Matas Buzelis ends up being worth those draft picks that we missed out on, and this team goes into a different area, I think that would be worth it. We just got to see. All right, let's get into the last voicemail, man. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. This is I'm calling in regards to the question of what is it worth to lose the pick if the Bulls make the playoffs. And for me, I've never been a fan of tanking. I always thought that a good organization, the word tank doesn't, appear in the vocabulary. They don't, if you're a player, you're a coach, you don't utter the word in the building. So for me, I've always wanted the Bulls to do the best because that's how you build a winning culture. And you got a lot of a good core of young guys on the team right now, and they need to see what it looks like to go all out, to play hard, to play with effort. That was one of the problems that this Bulls team has had for like the last 2 years, 2-3 years, where there's just games where they just were going through the motion. They didn't want to do nothing. That's where times when I was talking about blowing it up. Because if you're on the court and you're not giving any effort, you don't supposed to be wearing a Bulls shirt. And in games where I've seen the Bulls give effort this year, they've been, at least worth 8th or 7th seed. And with all of the drama going on in Miami and with the Hawks and Pacers being inconsistent, I'm not sure if the 6th seed is out of reach for the Bulls, depending on whether or not the Bulls will be buyers or sellers in the trade deadline. But for me, I wouldn't mind them losing the pick if they get to the 5th seed, if they win at least 2 games. And if they show to eventual free agents that the Chicago Bulls is not an organization where you can just get your money and leave, it's someone that you might want to consider going to one day. That's my opinion. What's yours?
No organization, and specifically the players and the coaching staff, talk about tanking. They're out there competing. They're out there trying to win. They're out there fighting. And that's what you should want. You want your team to fight. You want your team to be out there competing. And that's what this team is going to do, right? And so and tanking, we got to find a different word than tanking, I think, because this Bulls team was never going to tank. Now, even if they did move off of Zach, if they did move off of Vooch, right? If they moved off of those players, it was going to be because of them being a bad team. And thus, by being bad, they're naturally going to have a pick, right? And realizing, hey, we're not going to really see much with this core. This team was never going to be that team that just outrightly tanked. They just aren't going to be that, right? So I think that we need to find a place between tanking and kind of retooling. And that's really what this team was more so looking to do. And they may not even do that now because of the value around the league. And so we'll see what ends up happening there. But great voicemail, as always, Reginald. Great question as well. Great voicemails overall. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you guys leave your voicemails for tomorrow's mailbag. And I'll tell you the number to do that at. Make sure you're following us at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, but that's thanks to you, lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.